Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the ongoing political crisis in Thailand. How will this political instability affect the country's ability to tackle terrorism? And how will it affect its relationship with other Asian nations like China? Well, joining me now, right here in Washington, is Ernest Bower. He is a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And from Bangkok, we have Verapat Pariyawong, a Thai legal advisor and political commentator. Welcome to both of you to the show. Verapat, let me start with you. The military has taken over in Thailand. They are saying it's not a coup, but they've declared martial law. What do you make of this latest development?
Well, first of all, we have to stay very sharp that this could potentially become what I call a creeping coup. That is, although they try to rely on the archaic 100-year-old law, martial law, which is celebrating the century-old anniversary this particular year. The situation looks pretty grim. First of all, we've seen series of orders that directly infringes on the rights and liberties of the people. People can't really talk to the press right now in Thailand, fearing that there will be prosecutions from the military. The assemblies is limited in certain areas. So we have to be very careful about the terms that we use. Although they rely on martial law, this particular martial law, in my legal opinion, is quite contrary to the provisions and to the guarantees of the Constitution. But again, at the end of the tunnel, perhaps this is one opportunity that the military establishment in Thailand could prove themselves that there could be a way out if they can create a secured and inclusive environment for election and reform.
Ernest, sounds very ominous, these orders that have come from the military. I mean, as Verapat just pointed out, the military is saying that they want to create a climate whereby there could be free and fair elections take place. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's surprising the military moved this quickly. You know, there hadn't been, significant levels of violence. I wonder why the military stepped in now. I think it was earlier than any of us who watched Thailand expected it would happen. We weren't surprised that the military stepped in. But the question is, why now? And I'm troubled by the timing that's sort of it's co-timed with a move by the Thai Senate to unilaterally sort of appoint a government to take over for this caretaker government. And I wonder how that looks. I sort of agree that there are very troublesome signals here in how this was done.
Okay, Verapat, why do you believe the military acted right now? Is it, as Ernest says, because there was a development in the Senate, or was it because they saw an opportunity and they took it?
Well, this is a $1 billion question, I think. I mean, the theory that we used to have last week was that if the Senate could proceed without any military involvement to name a Section 7 Prime Minister, that is a Prime Minister that is appointed constitutionally without any involvement of the military, that could look somehow perhaps arguably legitimate in the eyes of those who favor that unconstitutional interpretations. But again, I think Ernie is correct that it's quite suspicious why the military decides to stage this martial law situation. I believe that the reasons lies in the sensitive information being released online recently. There have been some attempts to create a very frictious situation within Thailand, that this is no longer the battle between just Thaksin Shinawatra and Suthep Thaugsuban, no longer battles between the red shirts and the yellow shirts. The stake gets much higher due to recent release of sensitive information, which unfortunately I can't really discuss as long as I'm under the jurisdiction of the Thai legal system here. But I think that could be potentially one of the primary reasons why the military decided that they need to assume control. And if you notice carefully, the military is not only dealing with the protest areas, the military is also being very precise about the content of information being spread, being shared in the Thai media or even online in Thailand right now. So it's pretty clear that something sensitive is going on.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is dangerous. It's dangerous for Thailand. It's sort of also out of sync with what's going on in the rest of the region, Anand. You know, when you look at what Indonesia's done, where the Malaysians are headed, and you really see an empowered middle class sort of taking on what had been sort of the very centrally controlled structures of Southeast Asia. They worked well for Southeast Asia for decades after the colonial period, but I think what we see in Thailand right now is people want to have a view. They want to be heard, and they're challenging these traditional institutions, and the center is sort of striking back here.
Yeah, it does seem to be going in the other direction. The Financial Times reporting on Tuesday that prospects for a new election are receding. You know, the military is telling us, well, they're trying to create this environment where elections can take place, but we're hearing different from people on the ground there. And in fact, the Election Commission in Thailand says conditions are too unstable for what is happening in the country now for elections to happen, with these protests continuing.
Yeah, I think for the legacy of His Royal Highness, they want to have a legacy of legality, but they don't. The monarchy and the Privy Council and others don't want the monarchy put in a position where they will feel like they're influenced by Thaksin or the Red Shirts or these other parties. And I think the real power struggle here, it's existential. The real power struggle is for who will be in control when the succession takes place. And so it's like a musical chairs. You know, when the music stops, when that moment sadly comes, who will have the power to organize the new Thai polity? And that's the question, I think.
Right, and it's not a very clear picture. Let me go to Verapat on this. Verapat, what kind of role does the monarchy play in Thailand? Because we're hearing right now that the current monarch, the king, is 86 years old. He's very frail. His chosen successor, we understand, is very close to Thaksin Shinawatra, and there is a preference among the country's elites for his sister to become the next queen of Thailand. So it's a confusing picture.
Well, to tell you honest truth, for the sake of my own safety, from persecution under Thai law, I can't really discuss these topics with the forthright answers, and that's very unfortunate. I feel quite bad about that situation, but that's the reality on the ground. What I can say is that the law is quite clear, and that the Crown Prince is to succeed to the throne. And my take is if everyone in Thailand, all sides, obey the constitution, follow the succession law, then it's a very straightforward solution for Thailand. The problem we are in right now is that someone at least is trying to say that perhaps there's something about the law, perhaps there's something that they need to change about it. I don't know, I don't have any concrete evidence to back that up, but all suggestions that we've seen so far, of course, taking into account what Ernie just mentioned earlier and the release of sensitive information we've seen for the past 2 days that could have triggered the declaration of martial law, has painted the picture in Thailand that this is no longer the battle between just the red shirts and yellow shirts on the streets. But let me say this is what I can say in a very clear and outright way. I would say that right now, since the military has staged the martial law situation, and we can debate whether we agree with that, we can debate the constitutionality of the martial law, but I say this is a very clear situation that the military has two clear choices at hand. First, the military could use this as an opportunity to use the martial law power it has in its hand to create a stable, inclusive, and secure environment where all parties can come to discussions how to reform our country and how to move forward for a fair and free election under civilian government, and then pass on the democratic process towards the next fully elected government. The other choice, also very clear, is to intervene in the constitutional process, try to come up with some form of concocted interpretations of the constitution, leading to the removal of the current caretaking government, installing an appointed government of some sort, and thereby creating the next round of big conflicts. So the two choices are very clear. I can certainly hope that the military would take the first choice, and I would hope that the Thai society at large would work together to urge the military to go that way.
Do you agree with those options, Ernest?
I do. I think he's generally right, and I do think option 2 would guarantee a conflict in Thailand, and it would be a mess. Okay,
let me ask you about something else, and that is about the impact all this uncertainty is having in Thailand. The economy is shrinking. In fact, it shrank in the first quarter.
Correct.
I mean, are these problems in the country, these latest developments, going to add to the country's economic woes?
It will. You know, Anand, there's a group in Thailand we call the B7. They're the business leaders of the large, Thai associations, and they have tried to weigh in to avoid this conflict. and gave advice on how to avoid these steps that we're living through right now. The economy is being hit, and we have seen from earlier, a couple of years ago, when the flooding hit Thailand, what a big role Thailand plays in the global supply chain. Not just Asia, mind you, global supply chain. It's a key part of auto manufacturing, electronics, and others. So we can't just have Thailand sort of unplug from the region's economy. It will really hurt all of us around the globe, and particularly in developed economies like Europe and the United States.
Right, Verapat, I just want to get on to one other issue, and that is foreign policy. Thailand has a close relationship with China. In fact, China invested something like $6 billion in, at least China invested $6 billion in Thailand last year. There are several projects that they're jointly working on. How does Yingluck Shinawat's ouster affect that relationship?
Well, first of all, we have to say that the focus of the Yingluck administration to promote trade, to promote investments, to create infrastructure that would support such investments have all been taken away by these political turmoils. So we can't really blame Yingluck administration for not doing more. They could have tried to install the next future of the high-speed train infrastructure that would certainly not only welcome investments from China, but also to connect the ASEAN region altogether. But those plans have been squashed not only by political turmoils, but also by the acts of the constitutional courts, which declared that those projects are not necessarily important for Thailand at the moment. So I think the legacy or the bad fruits of the Thai political conflicts have really affected the trade and investment relationships between Thailand and China. I would hope, though, that China would express more concerns. We've heard from the spokesperson from the State Department, we've heard from Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we've heard from Indonesian and Philippines, but I think China could have expressed more concerns about situations at hand going on in Thailand, especially with the control, almost full control under the military. I would say, with one caution though, that those investors, those experienced, well-seasoned investors who have been investing in Thailand for the past 2 or 3 decades know full well that despite all these turmoils going on in Thailand, as long as you know the right people, as long as you have the correct connections in Thailand, these protests won't affect your trades and investment too much or too substantially. But that could change because those key people are starting to change.
What about the view from Washington? The State Department did say that they're very concerned about latest developments there, but what else can the United States do?
Not much. Thailand is our oldest treaty ally in Asia. It's a very important country to the United States, but this situation is quintessentially a Thai situation. Only Thais can really resolve it. In fact, trying to do too much could be a real problem. I think the United States has done the right thing by encouraging the military to keep martial law very short and move back to democratic elections. It's the option one that Verapat talked about.
Ernest Bower, Verapat Pariyawong, thanks for joining us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat.